It's a little bit odd for me to kick off this video because I'm aware that a few people are going to watch it who've never seen any other video on my channel, because this video does discuss NPD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder, and I hope to discuss it in a meaningful way with some sensitivity and with some depth. On the other hand, I know that people are going to be clicking on this video who are regular viewers of my channel who probably have no specific interest in NPD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder, and they instead want to hear me talk about the film that I'm linking to in the description below this video, a film really dealing with narcissism, why it matters, why it is so troubling for us to think about in terms of recent events within veganism as a movement. Oh, great, I'm wrecking my set here. Morty, get tech support. Why it matters so much in veganism, why it's something important for us to think about in terms of the internal politics within veganism in 2017 and beyond. Look, guys, the main compliment I want to give to the video I'm linking to here, video by NorVegan, over an hour long, in-depth discussion, part one of a 3-part documentary. And full disclosure, I have had email back and forth with this guy, NorVegan. He asked me for some screenshots. He asked me what happened at various times. And to my knowledge, part 2 and part 3 of this documentary series is going to talk a lot more about me and what I've been doing in the vegan movement in the last couple of years. The biggest, most important compliment I can give this video is that I know for a fact it reached its target audience. It reached its intended audience. The message he was delivering got to the people whom he wanted to hear it, and it got to the people who really needed to hear it. Now, this is a backhanded compliment, because the fact is I am not really that audience. I'm not the kind of guy who needs to hear this. I've got an email from Chiang Mai, and people saying, look, groups of vegans in Chiang Mai sat down and watched this video about narcissism, about NPD, about these psychological factors that are linked to political questions we have in veganism today. They watched it, and for them it was stunning, it was shocking, it was a whole new perspective on what's been going on in veganism the last couple of years, and also the particular examples, the particular case studies, whatever you want to say, particular bits of evidence employed were really shocking and new to them. So that's very positive. As I say, I say that just as a compliment to the filmmaker, to NorVegan, that he really did a good job. He reached the people whom he wanted to reach and the people who needed to hear it. Now for me, it's a little bit overly familiar, right? Like most of the facts he's trotting out, almost all of it, I've kind of heard it before. I feel I've heard it too many times. A lot of it's stuff I don't want to talk about, I don't want to deal with anymore, etc. And oddly, that's the case for me both with the case study, the issues within veganism, and with these arguments linked to narcissism and NPD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder, strictly defined. Look, guys, I have known several people whom I believe did have narcissistic personality disorder. Just one, to my knowledge, was formally diagnosed with the disorder in a psychiatric establishment by psychiatric professionals. If you have met someone with this disorder, it's unlikely they have been diagnosed. And then if they have been diagnosed, it may be incredibly difficult to get them to admit that they've been diagnosed. As you can guess, even from the name of the disorder, people who are narcissists in this sense, people who are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, are quite reluctant to admit something as humiliating and disempowering to you as that they have a really serious psychological problem. They have a personality disorder of this kind. And it is still just not that commonly diagnosed. It's difficult to diagnose. I'm going to get into that a little bit. And my main reservation in endorsing this video by NorVegan, which is in many ways a great video, link provided, I hope you all see it, and watch as much or as little as you like. My main reservation is something that he addresses himself within the first 10 minutes of the video. He talks about the extent to which this word narcissism has become diluted and diluted. It's become an almost meaningless insult. It's become a general category of bad behavior, and more stuff is just flung into this category. Whatever people dislike about somebody, whatever they want to complain about, just gets categorized as narcissism. And from my perspective, that's a dangerous tendency. Given that NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, given that it is actually in the class of personality disorders that as we examine it more and more, as we study it scientifically more and more, it actually becomes realer and realer. What do I mean by that? Some concepts in psychology came to be regarded with greater and greater skepticism over time. Is psychopath something with medical reality, or is it really just a cultural concept or even a kind of stereotype that we're applying to human behavior that really is unrelated and doesn't fall into one category and is certainly not a medical condition? Within my lifetime, I'm 38 years old, I've actually seen psychopath go through different fads and phases. There were periods of time when it seemed like the consensus was that no, it was not a medically valid term at all. There were periods of time when people felt they had mustered together enough evidence to really take this seriously as a medical condition. And just in the last 5 years, I would say, the pendulum swung back the other way, and more, it seems like the scientific perspective is that no, this is a pattern of behavior, but there's no medical reality, there's no biological reality to it, there's no sense in which it is a real psychological problem any more than we can group together any other bunch of human characteristics, traits, or behaviors and then describe them as a personality type. By contrast, I'm going to give you a link below this video to a formal scientific article involving MRI scans, so brain scans, magnetic resonance imaging scans of the brain, of people with narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. And this is a first step towards the thesis that NPD really does exist in the sense of a brain abnormality. I am not saying to you that this is an open and shut case. I'm not saying that the scientific research is finished and over. I think it's at a very preliminary stage. However, if you have met several different people with NPD, the extent to which their behaviors and symptoms are similar is mind-blowing. You feel like you're meeting the same person again. You can't believe that the same extremely idiosyncratic, irrational, just weird behavior that you thought was so unique about this one person, the first person you met with NPD, that you're discovering it again in another person from another culture, another walk of life, totally different experience, who speaks with a different accent. And yet you're seeing this same pattern manifest itself. I feel that the video by NorVegan, it falls into a trap that it's set for itself. Because in the intro it says, look, we can't just treat narcissism as a category for all the things we dislike about a person. We can't just say, here are a bunch of bad traits, throw them together, and start talking in terms of stereotypes. And yet the video as a whole, and over an hour long, I think does fall into that trap. It does indulge in a great deal of that in quoting from these other YouTube channels reflecting on it. One of the most important observers of NPD is a YouTuber named Sam Vaknin. He's also published books and articles. He is diagnosed with NPD himself, and he devoted a large part of his life to studying and really philosophizing about what narcissistic personality disorder is, how to understand it, how to explain it to people. And I think that none of the discussion in NorVegan's video talks about the fragility that, from my perspective, is at the core of NPD. Now, I'm going to make this as anonymous as possible. One person whom I know, as far as I can be sure of anything, one person whom I know to have NPD sat down with another person. So person A and person B sat down at a table. And person A was presenting an academic paper he had written to person B. And person A, after presenting this paper, sat there. This is a grown man, fully grown adult, and in a manner that would seem childish and shocking for anyone over 11 years of age, maybe would even be surprising with an 8-year-old, sat there and said, "My paper, did you read it? Isn't it the most brilliant thing you've ever seen? Isn't it brilliant? Isn't it genius? Isn't it fantastic?" And absolutely any answer other than it's brilliant, it's genius, it's fantastic, would result in him having a kind of emotional collapse on the spot, and him becoming crestfallen. Sam Vaknin talks about this a lot in terms of narcissistic supply. He talks about the extent to which people with NPD rely on external sources of validation, external sources of affirmation, confirmation constantly that they're reaching out for narcissistic supply, as he called it, something to confirm their sense of worth, the sense that they're good enough. And I'll tack on an observation of my own here, having spent time with people with NPD. That is a pattern that I can understand and relate to only from incredibly early childhood memories. I think if you can remember yourself at about age 4, you can probably remember what it was like to look around the world in a slightly off-balance, disoriented way. You can't fully understand even the language people are using. When you're 4, grown-ups use grown-up words and you're only following half of what they're saying. And of just looking around nervously, trying to get confirmation that you're doing the right thing, even that you're in the right place. You're 4 years old and you're disoriented. I really see several of the personality disorders, sensory stricto here, I see them in many ways as being a manifestation of early childhood characteristics still being present later in adult life. And this shockingly childish vulnerability, neediness, reaching out for affirmation, that's what's there all the time for people who genuinely have NPD. And it's misleading to examine the condition in terms of grandiosity, in terms of the lies they tell, in terms of grandiose behavior, which not all of them have, by the way. Some people with NPD are very self-pitying. Some people with NPD are charming and some are not. Some are storytellers and some are taciturn. Some use their physical bodies and their physical appearance to try to get affirmation from other people and so on. Actually, the ways in which the disorder manifests itself, the way in which people act out these tropes, is quite a lot of variety. But I think the bedrock of the condition is that terrible sense of vulnerability they have all the time. And it's telling. Sam Vaknin himself has reflected on this. There are other types of mania. Let's just say there are other types of egomania, where the maniac is happy. If you're an egomaniac in the simplest sense, maybe you just have tremendous confidence in your own worth, everything you're doing with your life and what have you. People with NPD, you really can't understand them at all if you don't understand the extent to which their lives are really nightmarish. They're in a constant state of gnawing self-doubt, uncertainty, misery, childlike need for someone to pat them on the head and tell them that what they're doing is good and right. What they need above all else is to be told that they're an exception to the rules, that they're exceptional. One of the classic symptoms of NPD is that when they show up at the psychiatrist's office for, a consultation or evaluation, whatever it may be, that they start bullying the secretary at the front of the office into making an exception for the rules to schedule when the appointment is going to be. And normal adults just don't do that. And of course, secretaries and offices that deal with people with NPD, it happens again and again. So they learn to kind of smile and shrug their shoulders at it. But again, it's not just bullying. It's not just narcissism. It's not egomania in that sense. What you have to understand is from their perspective, they feel this desperate need for some kind of recognition or affirmation from the secretary. And they're trying to get that by forcing the secretary to make an exception to the scheduling rules. So the secretary will say, you're special, you're different from the others, we're going to make an exception in your case. And again, maybe at 4 years old, maybe at 8 years old, if you dig around in your earliest memories, maybe you can find something like that where you felt that way as a little kid. You wanted to know you weren't just another face in the crowd. But people with NPD, I feel, really never move on to the sense of self-reliance, self-confidence that most of us as adults take for granted, where we, on a very deep level, just do not care what the secretary making the appointment thinks of us. We don't care if we're just another name on a list or just another face in the crowd. Or if we do care, we have other more constructive ways to try to exercise our egos or what have you. I wish I could say that NPD is a minor footnote in my life, that it's something I'm never going to have to deal with again. To be honest with you, this is a rare condition. It is rare. And yet it is one of the personality disorders that in our society people can get ahead with. You can meet people who've risen to high levels of fame and prominence and just high levels of professional attainment with it, I think I will encounter people with NPD again. And the hardest thing about making this judgment, if you were actually trying to diagnose people with NPD, I think in principle it is impossible to diagnose someone with NPD so long as they can edit the videos that they are uploading themselves. Almost by definition, all of the evidence that someone really has NPD, that terrible vulnerability I'm talking about, that terrible neediness, that's exactly what would never show up in a video they have the power to edit themselves. That's exactly what they never disclose. Whereas if you know someone with NPD face to face, in the workplace, in your own family, what have you, then that's what's most striking, where over time you understand that to be the key to how they see the world. I have had people writing to me many times over the last several years asking me if other specific vegans on YouTube, other specific vegan political leaders, if they have NPD. And writing back to them with all due honesty, even though I really have done quite a lot of research on NPD because I've known people with the condition, I have to write back to them, no, keeping it all the way real, I don't know, I can't know, and I think you also can't know unless you spend time with that person face to face in real life. And on the other hand, NPD, it's striking, if you've really spent quality time with one person who has the condition, how much they resemble in their behaviors, in their affectations, in their paranoid excesses, how much they resemble other people with the condition. But I absolutely would not make that judgment on the basis of YouTube videos. Okay, guys. So again, this is in some ways just a shout out for the 3-part documentary series by NorVegan. You're going to find the link below this video. And I just say, it's not what I created this channel for, but I am knowledgeable at NPD as it happens. And it may well be that if you guys in Patreon or otherwise want to carry on this discussion with me, I certainly could make more videos talking about the disorder, how I've encountered it and perceived it in my own life, the ways in which it matters, and I mean even the prospects in the future. Is there any treatment? Is there a way to help people? Because if you have people in your own life who have NPD, you must ask yourself all the time, what can I do to help? And the vast majority of the literature, both medical literature, autobiographical literature, just anecdotal literature, it comes to the conclusion that there is absolutely nothing you can do to help, that the only thing that you can do is walk away. But ultimately, human beings with NPD are still human beings. They still do have the power to change in meaningful ways. They have the power to become vegan. They have the power to try to make a positive difference in the world instead of a negative difference. And if you check out the YouTube channel of Sam Vaknin, even though he still struggles with NPD, he struggles with the effects of the disorder day after day, he is also an example of someone who became aware that he had the disorder, tried to work around it, tried to, despite that disorder, do something positive in the world, something positive for his fellow man. And I am out.